So today's lunchtime webinar is about what good practice looks like in terms of people expecting, women expecting or having a baby with Down syndrome. So if you haven't been to one of these webinars before, my name's Lou. I'm the training manager for Positive About Down Syndrome / Down Syndrome UK. And we are really, really pleased to have join us Lisa Bellows, who's antenatal screening lead at Birmingham Women's Hospital, who's going to talk to us about the good practice that happens in her hospital. We've got a video from Nikki Edgington, who's a mum who had her baby at Lisa's hospital, and we're really lucky to be joined today by Graham, giving us the dad's voice, but also his positive experience when they had their son. So hopefully everyone will have enough time to speak, and we'll still have time for questions at the end as well. So just briefly, if you've not been to one of these webinars before, Positive About Down Syndrome comes under the umbrella charity of Down Syndrome UK. We're a parent-led organisation. We provide information to parents, but also professionals have access to our literature and training schemes. So we have ongoing peer support for families, expert advice. We have it all in one place so that they know families can get the right support and access it all from one place. We train, we have support webinars and sessions for parents, but we also do this kind of thing for professionals. We talk to anyone really about Down syndrome, and we know that as an organisation, we really are making a difference to professionals and families. We're also, Nicola and I are also part of members of the Down syndrome, the National Down Syndrome Policy Group, who've been supporting Liam Fox in the bringing of the Down Syndrome Act 2022. So we are involved in campaigning and lobbying for rights for people with Down syndrome from, point of birth to point of death. So we did a bit of research a few years ago. We've redone it, but the new research hasn't been published yet, but very similar results. Sorry if you've seen this all before, but we asked women whether they were given the news when they're given the news that their baby had Down syndrome at whatever point that was that done in a positive way or a negative way? And we found that actually those negative experiences were quite prevalent. In terms of this is from our recent research that we've done in terms of mental health. We asked women, how did that affect your mental health? And we found that 37% for the attitudes of healthcare professionals had a negative effect on their well-being, but also in terms of, we asked them, did they have sufficient mental well-being support? And the results were that they felt that they didn't, and that got even less support in the postnatal period. And that's compared to the mothers from the general population, which was 85%. So it's quite a disparity there. So to talk about the good practice, we have now, Lisa is going to tell us, hopefully this is all going to work. I do apologise that I'm going from screen to screen, sharing all sorts of things. I'm hoping it's all going to work very well. So Lisa contacted us. She's a really good advocate for Positive About Down syndrome, and she contacted us saying that, really we should stop sharing that poor practice and start sharing some good practice, and that's why she's here today. So over to you, Lisa. I'll move your slides on.
Lovely, thank you. Hi everyone. So yeah, if you move for the first slide, Lou, that'd be great. So just a little bit about me. So my name is Lisa. I have worked at Birmingham Women's and Children's Hospital my whole career, and I've been the antenatal screening lead for the last 6 years. Before that, I held a rotational post between screening and fetal medicine, but it soon became apparent to me that I preferred the autonomy that screening allows for a midwife. Even longer before that, I was called Delivery Suite, and my passion has always lay with complex pregnancies. I first met Nicola Enoch, who is obviously associated with PADS, and other members of various support groups when I attended training at Birmingham City Football Ground, which I'm sure some of you were at, for the NIP screening that at the time was about to be rolled out. It was meeting those founders of support groups and family members of people who had Down syndrome that actually inspired me and challenged the way that I thought. And so this is the point where I really became interested in this area. And from then I started attending PADS updates and webinars. As Lou said, during these sessions, families and professionals would share what we call horror stories. And obviously everybody on the webinar is shocked and horrified at those stories, but I do think it is ending up preaching to the converted, because if you're on this call, you're actually interested in being positive about Down syndrome and looking at what we can do to make things better for our families. So I just felt like actually we need to learn from good practice. So, and as someone who's developed their own pathway since for women and families expecting a baby with Down syndrome, I sometimes felt a little bit midwife bashed. So being the shy, retiring person that I am, Lou asked for feedback and I politely gave it, and here we are. So as I say, we're all aghast with the horror stories, but I do truly believe that in today's world, it's just not enough to just not discriminate. We need to challenge that discrimination. This should be applied to women, families, our staff, and of course our babies. And then we need to develop and implement anti-discriminatory care pathways. So as the screening lead, my role involves overseeing all the antenatal national screening programmes delivered at Birmingham Women's and Children's to ensure that the programmes are delivered in a fair, equitable and timely way, as well as all the data collection and outcomes. I'm responsible to make sure that anyone who chooses to have any of the screening we offer, that they are in fact screened. And obviously this sometimes can be a little bit dry. I need to have some clinical in my life. So secondary to that, I've been the named midwife for our women who are living with HIV. Obviously very different to expecting a baby with Down syndrome, but HIV is part of the national screening programme. And research and the National Beaver guidelines, they're the HIV guidelines, recommend that these women and families should have a named midwife to result in better outcomes for both mum and baby. So it got me thinking. When I was younger and naive, as a junior screening midwife, I asked a senior midwife why we don't have a specialist pathway for women and families expecting a baby with Down syndrome. And I was firmly told that if we have one for Down syndrome, we have to have it for every other condition or difference that we find. And I took that at face value. Fast forward a few years, I got a little bit more confident and a little bit louder. And then I met Nikki, who you'll see her video in a little bit, and her husband, Blake. It was at the height of COVID. I called Nikki on her own to come in and talk to me about her high chance screening result. She was firm from the very beginning that no matter the outcome of our conversation and any tests I offered her, she was fully committed to her baby. And she smiled. I smiled with her because I knew then that we were about to embark on a bit of a journey together. Nikki attended most of her appointments on her own, as was recommended at the time. So I felt she needed someone extra and someone with her, especially when the unexpected was anticipated. We're going to have a video from Nikki shortly, and she will describe our journey and the impact it had on her, and and tell you about the very exciting and eventful arrival of beautiful Bailey. Next slide, please, Lou. Within the video, Nikki will mention continuity a lot and my name a lot. I do blush when she talks about me, but ultimately it could be any named person. In maternity, we know full well what the benefits of continuity of care are. We know that 16% of women are less likely to lose their baby, and that 24% are less likely to experience a preterm birth. Other benefits are emotional, psychological, and social safety for the mother. It enables you to build that relationship with her, get to know her, and help her share her anxieties. They are more likely to open up to someone they've met several times rather than meeting a new person at every appointment. There's consistency in information sharing, so you know exactly what you've told them, when you've told them, and to what extent it's been understood, and if anything needs repeating. And completely selfishly, midwives benefit from continuity too. It is really wonderful to see a woman through her journey and have a job well done at the end of it. Lou, you happy to play Nikki's video?
Yep, hope so. Hold on.
And I'll talk after.
Okay, so I'm going to end this show here. I'm going to, so hopefully you can see that. I don't know
this
how
is
to
our
play
family.
it.
We are the
On.
Edgingtons.
You
can see my husband Blake there, and of course our star attraction Bailey.
Okay.
We're here today to tell you a little bit about our positive experience of Bailey's diagnosis of Down syndrome. Before I start, I am going to apologise. You might see me look down occasionally, looking at notes. I don't want to miss anything out. And even as a primary school teacher, I'm a little bit nervous chatting away. If you can hear some chatter in the background, it's Bailey. I'm here doing this while my husband's at work, and she's playing nicely with her dolly at the moment, but forgive the background chatter. I believe you've already met this lovely lady, Lisa, who in our house is affectionately known as the fairy godmother. We might not be here today with this positive story to tell and to tell you all about the little greatest joy of our lives. Our journey began at the beginning of COVID. Boris and his buddies had just called for the first lockdown, and we found out that we were pregnant. So I was a very nervous first-time mum going in for my scan. Blake had to sit in the car park. He wasn't allowed in, as you probably all know. And when they asked me if I wanted screening, I said yes, because I thought that's what everybody did. I didn't realise that most people opt out of it. Can you imagine our surprise when Lisa rang just a few days later to say that there was a chance our baby had Down syndrome? She invited me in for a chat while Blake had to sit in the car again, on loudspeaker this time, thanks to the rules of COVID at the time. Lisa explained that the screening results had showed a raised chance that Bailey had Down syndrome. And when we asked what that might mean for our pregnancy, she explained without bias and judgment that we did have the option to terminate if we wanted it. Very quickly squashed that idea. It wasn't something that we felt comfortable thinking about. This was our first child, we were going to love it. So she gave us some leaflets to take away and read. She explained that there was another blood test that we could have, the NIPT or the NIPT, which would give us a greater percentage chance of telling us whether Bailey would have Down syndrome or not. I keep saying chance because chance is very important. Bailey isn't a risk, was never a risk, and that's the language that you should be using. I won't lie, it was a long few weeks while we waited for that phone call to tell Lisa to give us the results. I did cry a lot. At the time, I didn't know anything about Down syndrome, really. I was quite naive and ignorant about what that would mean for our lives. Which takes us to our second phone call from Lisa, the results of the NIPT, showing that Bailey had a 99% chance of having Down syndrome. Yes, this time we were both invited in. Blake was allowed to come in this time. Lisa showed us some books positive about Down syndrome, wouldn't change a thing, and there was an ARC booklet in there too. She gave us time to ask questions about what the rest of our pregnancy would look like, and then left us alone to look at the books for a little while. I think she knew pretty quickly that we meant what we'd said earlier, that we were going to continue with the pregnancy regardless. Her smile said that she was happy, even though she was being professionally unbiased. She talked to us a lot more about PADS, who had a Facebook group for expectant mums. I joined it, and I was given another mum who has got a son with Down syndrome, Lorraine, and she followed me throughout my pregnancy and still checks on Bailey today, asking how she is. Which takes us on to the very first pathway. I'm sure Lisa explained that originally it was unintended, that we were the test dummies, so I should say. From that point on, Lisa was by my side for every appointment. We were under fetal medicine now, so Blake could come to those appointments, but any general appointments I'd have to go by myself. And then Lisa was on hand to sit with me for support. As you probably know, babies that are born with Down syndrome, around 50% of them are born with heart complications and might need surgery. Bailey was one of the 50%, and Lisa was there to help us with that too. She oversaw the scans and the meetings where the cardiac consultant, Michael, Dr. Harris, was, and she stayed behind afterwards to answer any questions that we'd been a little bit too embarrassed or maybe hadn't thought of when he was there. Lisa essentially was just consistent. Having that one person there at my side throughout was really reassuring, calmed any anxieties. It was really good not to have to explain Bailey's diagnosis to somebody every time I met them. it's a little bit sad to say that it was me answering my community midwife's questions about Down syndrome, and the fact that some sonographers hadn't read past my name and address to check who I was, and didn't know themselves. Lisa was my armour. She was there to explain if I wasn't feeling it that day, or if I needed my hand holding. She was excited for us, as she should be. She was the first person to know that our baby was going to be a girl and that we were going to call her Bailey. Another important thing that Lucy would do was check in on us in between appointments. At one point, she realised that Blake hadn't heard the heartbeat, for example. So she invited us into fetal medicine for an appointment to make sure that he could do that, which was magical. And that was actually the day that we found out that we were going to be buying pink baby grows. So fast forward to Bailey's birth. Again, COVID played a part in that. Thank goodness times have changed now. We found out 2 weeks before that Bailey was breech, and we were given the option for a C-section, which I took. It meant that we would have to have COVID tests the day before. Unfortunately, Blake's came back positive, which meant that he wasn't allowed to be at the birth. I was allowed to take my mum, but I needed somebody else there, somebody that knew everything, all the medical, and in stepped Lisa. Now, I'm not advocating for you all to give up your annual leave to be at the births of children with Down syndrome, but that's what Lisa did. That's how magical she is. She held Bailey first. She sent pictures to Blake. She went down to the NICU to check on Bailey and come back and told me how she was. Obviously, COVID rules at the time meant that I wasn't allowed anywhere near Bailey because I'd been in contact with Blake. I was a bit of a mess for 4 days, but knowing that Lisa could go in and check on Bailey was really reassuring. And that's why we call her the fairy godmother. Of course, that she recognised throughout the pregnancy, not just after the birth, that Blake would be really anxious too. She checked in on him. Her whole ethos is centred around the parents and making sure that the whole family is ready and well and knows that we're prepared. Our story should end there. Not only because I'm probably going to run over the time I've been given to speak, but because that's generally what happens with midwives, that once the baby's born, you say goodbye to them, really. But because we've built up such a bond throughout the pregnancy, she's in our lives. We meet not regularly enough, I'm sure she's saying in the background there, for coffee. She comes round, we know her children now. And again, that's not something that you will all do, but that's what happened for us. That's how positive our experience has been. Of course, since she's developed her pathway and she's made sure that Birmingham Women's Hospital have recognised how positive it's been for us, and that every parent having a child with Down syndrome should receive the same. I've given her permission to share my contact details with any parents that want them. We're immensely proud of her for advocating for families of children with Down syndrome. Really proud. There's a lot of talk about screening and the impact it has on termination rates for parents having children with Down syndrome. I always advocate for it. If we hadn't have had the screening, we wouldn't have known about Bailey. We would have found out when she was born. I would have been alone with my mum. Blake would have been at home. I would have had to tell him later. Yeah, I always recommend to my friends to have it. I think it was really important. It gave us time to learn. Of course, we learned from Positive About Down syndrome and their Expectant Mums group, which was immensely helpful. But we also learned, we got a chance to look at social media and look at other families, look what their lives were like. That's been immensely important to us. We've now set up our own page for Bailey. I'll share the details at the end if anyone wants to follow, just so that we can show off how regular our life is. Yes, there are more appointments, and yes, she has had to have surgeries, but that can happen for any child. We just want to show off how wonderful she is. I know that our story is really unique, not only because of all the COVID restrictions that were in place at the time and because of Bailey's medical history, but we had Lisa. If I could just instill a few simple things in you all today, I'd be really grateful. Down syndrome isn't scary. It isn't a risk. Your positive language does make a difference. Mums notice it. There's a lot of talk in the Down syndrome community about parents that haven't had the same experience as myself and Blake, and it does make us incredibly sad, but ridiculously grateful that we had Lisa. Being a consistent person at those appointments is huge. It makes a huge difference. So if you could do that, that would be wonderful. And signposting to places like PADS. It's just, it gives you a wealth of knowledge. I know that you have to be unbiased, and I know that you have to give out all the booklets. We found the ARC one about a year after Bailey was born when I was sorting out her medical folder. I hadn't really taken any notice of it because it wasn't on our radar at the time. And I'm sure Lisa would have explained it had we asked, but it was all the positive things, positive about Down syndrome leaflets. And then we were sent a book called Nobody Told Me, and that was wonderful. If you haven't got a copy, please make sure you get one. Okay, thank you for listening to me ramble on, letting me use my notes and looking down. I am really grateful for you taking the time to do the training. I hope that you learned something from our story or from Lisa's pathway. Please fight for it in your hospitals. That's it for me, really. Just one last person to say goodbye to. Bye. Say goodbye. Bye. Look at this. Bye.
Okay, so hopefully I can go back to Lisa's presentation. I'm really sorry about all the typos and wrong things. They weren't talking about Bailey's bath. They were talking about Bailey's.
I know, they were funny.
I'm really sorry. It was a last minute thing that I asked the team to do, thinking that we should probably have subtitles, and I didn't have time to check. So apologies for that. But hopefully it didn't detract from the message that Nikki was passing on. So this is your next slide.
Real, thank you. I'll try and speed up. I'm conscious of time and that Graham gets his opportunity to talk. So obviously my name was there a lot, but as Nikki said, she was my guinea pig. After our relationship flourished and after Bailey was born, and following on from a PADS webinar, I became familiar with the pathway that George's Hospital have in place for families known to expecting a baby with Downs, and I used it to base my own. So I'm hoping there's no copyright laws. If you're going to do it in your trust, it's not about changing everything available with the care. There are probably a lot of things already in place at your own trust or the fetal medicine unit that you use. It's just about streamlining it and having that one person who can coordinate and manage that for that particular family. So it doesn't have to be me. If one of my team met the woman first and they'd got a good rapport and a good relationship, I would happily support that relationship continues, and the pathway gives scope for that. On the pathway, we include anyone with a diagnosis or have a higher chance from NIPT, or even scan findings that are highly indicative of having a baby with Down syndrome. We transfer our women to James Castleman. He's one of our consultants. And I mentioned James because he was integral in getting the pathway off the ground, fully supportive. He's literally just texted me to say, hope it goes well. He is in fetal medicine at the minute, can't get out. So following that result or a diagnosis, we'll invite couples in to talk about it. So the first thing we do is offer congratulations. It might seem simple, but it is you know, congratulations, you're having a baby. We'll have a sit down, we'll have a chat, signpost them to support groups, blogs and social media pages. Not going to lie, Pads is my favourite. At this point, I do explain about the room to families. I know from personal feedback and stories that the rooms that we use sometimes can get bad press, but in a busy clinic, having our quiet room, that's what we call it, the quiet room, allows us the time and space to discuss with families and not be interrupted. I find explaining about the room in this first instance can take away some of that bad news feeling that families feel from it. We'll offer fetal echoes, 16 weeks and 20 weeks, just because of the association with cardiac differences. And we'll have a detailed scan at 20 weeks. James will do that. And that's at the first point that they'll meet James, because he'll be their consultant going forward, having a good look at the physical appearance of baby. We also offer growth scans, usually from about 28 weeks, because we know that babies with Down syndrome can be a little bit on the smaller side. And they'll have opportunities to meet with our neonatologists, just if we anticipate a short stay on neonatal unit, on what could be expected in that neonatal period. And I'll give them a tour of the neonatal unit. So I personally will take them round, and so they can have a little look, because I feel that sometimes if your baby gets taken to the unit and the first time you ever see a place like that, it's really scary, the noises, the beeps, the hustle and bustle. But actually, if you've seen it before and you know what it's for and it's normal, then actually when your baby's there, it might not be so scary. Or similarly, if you have just birthed baby gets taken down to the neonatal unit, at least you can visualize where your baby is if you can't go with baby. If we saw any structural differences at those scans, we might give people the opportunity to meet with the surgeon. So we use the Children's Hospital, obviously with the same trust, but it's across sites. And they'll get to go over to the Children's, meet the team there and look at the wards there, just so at least they get an idea of what to expect for their baby. Our infant feeding team have been brilliant. They're well versed on supporting mums to feed their baby with Down syndrome, particularly breastfeeding. So we'll do an early referral to them. And Sarah, who is the breastfeeding coordinator at Positive About Downs, she might be a little bit sick of me now, but I have referred many women to her, and I know she's provided massive support. And later on, we'll talk about induction and mode of delivery, and that is on an individual basis, depending on how the pregnancy is going. The timing of everything that we offer is family and woman-led, and it can be repeated if needed. Next slide, please, Lou. So I like the poster of Sophie. I have used it in our pathway, and it is laminated around our clinic. I just think it shows you the impact of language, and Nikki mentioned language a lot. Sometimes people can say things without thinking, doesn't make it okay, but actually showing people the comparison of the language and what it might mean, I think sometimes can have a bigger impact on that person. Next slide, please, Lou. So kind of how do you go about it? How are you going to get it in your trust? So for me, the governance process was surprisingly easy, but it does take work and perseverance on your behalf. And remember, you can't do it on your own. So first of all, pitched the idea to my line manager, who is the matron for specialist services, and she just told me, yeah, go for it. So I know I was lucky there. But get yourself a supportive consultant. James Castleman, as I say, enlisted his help. He's perfect for the role because he's our obstetric lead for screening at the trust. He's also a fetal medicine consultant, and he can do all the technical things that I can't. So he'll do the detailed scan and the growth scans, and obviously later on just provide advice on timing and mode of delivery. Things like the referral to the peds and surgeons, I'm sure they're already there in your trust or in your fetal medicine unit that you need, but it's just about that individual midwife, so that now midwife being the port of call for chasing and coordinating all those appointments, reduces the stress and anxiety for mum and dad, and it is just those little things that make the whole pregnancy a lot easier. They're not repeating themselves. So when you write your pathway, ask the teams before, get them on side, network, make sure that they're happy to be included in the pathway, write it up in draft form and send it to people that it involves in the first place, but be prepared for criticism and changes. But it's at this point that I got the support from the other senior midwives across the trust. We have something called SIG, so our clinical improvement groups, all of our audit guidelines, pathways, they all go through SIG for approval. So it went through there, all of the senior team approved it. So then it was up to me to promote it. So just promote, get out there, be visible, be annoying, be that person that when they say, oh, that lady's having a Downs baby, politely correct them, no, it's a baby with Down syndrome. Equality and diversity should be at the forefront of everything that we do. Recently, we had a lovely photographer donate her professional photos to our corridor and antenatal clinic. She sent me the proofs, and whilst they were very lovely, they were all white babies who had a mum and a dad. So I thought, no, this isn't representative of the people that we serve in Birmingham. So I asked for a same-sex couple, I asked for some brown babies, and of course I asked for a baby with Down syndrome. She didn't have a baby with Down syndrome on her photos, so I got her a baby with Down syndrome, and one of our new mummies was very happy to go and have a photo shoot with lovely baby Grace. So she now is in our corridor and antenatal clinic. It's all about education. So if I was to leave the trust, somebody else could pick this up after me. We need to educate everybody. So part of the screening, we will educate the midwives every other year. So I use that as an opportunity to talk about our pathway. I am responsible for the fetal anomaly and screening training for the GP trainees. So again, I'll use it to talk about our pathway. And I do a session once a month with our medical students, so a different cohort every time. And I talk to them about what is Down syndrome, talk to them about, you know, screening in pregnancy, why we do it. And again, our pathway. So it's literally just getting out there and promoting it and using our opportunities. You do get a bit of a name for yourself, but I think that's in a good way. So usually when there's a birth with a postnatal surprise of Down syndrome on the wards or neonatal unit, I'm often called to see the parents and provide that support. You know, for me, this kind of change and development is midwifery at its best and exactly how it should be. Midwives should be and always have been advocates for their women, because midwife means with woman. Therefore, anyone continuing their pregnancies that might have a little bit more complexity in terms of scans, growth, interventions, I believe that they should be able to have that additional support to ensure their concerns are listened to, their decisions are articulated, fundamentally ensuring the safety and well-being of both mum and baby. So, thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to move swiftly on to Graham, who can have his 5 minutes of chatting about his life, and then hopefully we'll have time for some questions, because I'm sure you've got some questions. So over to you, Graham. Thanks for being here and sharing your story.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks for everyone joining us. I'll be brief. I know we're all busy. My name's Graham, the proud father of Henry, who you can see on this screen, who was born with Down syndrome in March 2021. He's now 2.5. We were really fortunate that we had a really positive experience in all our various contracts with all your colleagues within the NHS and professionals in the first several months of Henry's life. And I'd just like to briefly speak to you today about what that positive experience looked like and felt like for us as parents. And we had a postnatal diagnosis when Henry was 5 days old, and a positive blood test result when Henry was 24 days old. And there are 5 key moments in the first 3 months of Henry's life that I'd just like to quickly mention. At day 5 of Henry's life, we had a very positive experience from a very empathetic senior nurse on our maternity ward upon informing us that some markers had been noticed on Henry. And she explained that what those markers could mean. And I appreciate it must be very difficult for yourselves to give that sort of news to parents. But at that point, I personally believe that empathy and not sympathy is very, very helpful. It's difficult maybe to find exactly what empathy is rather than sympathy, but it's really important, I think. And our nurse's language was very empathetic, and her body language was confident and positive. And that initial experience set a really good tone for us as parents. And the second thing I wanted to mention was at day 10 of Henry's life, when we were spoken to in a very relaxed, calm and friendly way by a consultant paediatrician during the first visual observation of Henry before any blood test was done. And after the visual inspection, the consultant paediatrician and the midwife actually said that the markers that they noticed on Henry would mean a blood test should take place. And they commented that Down syndrome children and adults have wonderful lives these days, and said there's nothing to be scared of if we did receive a positive result, and that Henry would be just like every other child and have the same needs and wants as all of us. And they were very kind, positive, but also kept their tone, I'd say, light and matter of fact, which was a really helpful way of speaking to us at that point in time. The third thing I wanted to mention was at day 24 of Henry's life, in which the way we were spoken to by a locum paediatrician and being given the news that the blood test showed that Henry had Down syndrome, specifically for us, trisomy 21. And at that point, the paediatrician gave us a pack of information that is available in most maternity units given out by Positive About Down Syndrome charity. And that was really helpful to be given this and to know that there are such charities and support groups that NHS professionals are advocating. And we as parents knew absolutely nothing about Down syndrome at that stage. And that maternity pack led us on to make various positive and good connections. And at that point, the paediatrician reminded us as well that Henry just needs our love and our care and our teaching, and told us to enjoy every day. And they were really powerful words at that point, especially all the emotions that we were going through ourselves. The fourth thing I wanted to just mention was at day 35 of Henry's life. And that was our first appointment with our regular health visitor, who seemed to have a lot of experience and was able to start referring us to various local support groups and online support groups. And she was able to discuss in detail Henry's needs and wants as being no different from any other baby, which was very helpful to hear at that point. And those referrals to the support groups, often offered by third sector, were very important and wouldn't have happened without that very helpful health visitor who knew the landscape. And the fifth thing I just wanted to mention was day 90 of Henry's life, when the same consultant paediatrician we saw at day 10 saw him again for his 3 months follow-up for a physical examination. But this time she also focused on us as parents to see how we were getting on, which we really appreciated. And what was great at that appointment is that we left with the 5 primary referrals that all Down syndrome babies should but don't always receive, which is to audiology, ophthalmology, community paediatrician, speech and language, and portage. We found that quite overwhelming, but we've since realised how fortunate it was to get all those 5 referrals at the same time. I know we're running a bit short of time, so I'll just say, finally, Henry's doing really well. He's a cheeky 2.5-year-old who is now walking, babbling, and starting his speech and language therapy. He receives really wonderful support from the NHS and all your colleagues, and also third sector organisations. And like all of us, he just wants to be loved. And I know that you can help parents understand that from very early on. So thanks for taking the time to listen to me, and wish you all the best with your contacts that you have with parents of a newborn baby with Down syndrome.
Brilliant. Thanks, Graham. That was really, really very kind of you to share that with everybody. So just briefly, if you need any more information about Down syndrome, our website is got most things that you would need. And what's really good, if you didn't know, if you haven't looked at it already, is it can be translated into other languages. So if you're coming across families where English isn't their first language, and the issues that you have, via interpreters maybe not giving the full story, our website can be translated into other languages.